government there wants.
OK, let's take some more questions for the audience.
You recently described the Boston bombings as manifesting a kind of sick madness because of the way in which the bombers targeted innocent civilians, people whom you described as having nothing to do with the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan that motivated the bombings. I was just wondering how you'd reconcile that attitude with what you said about the Kosovo intervention in 1999. You advocated the use of what you called less than surgical strikes, i.e. strikes that are not aimed at military targets, and unreasonable bombing, which sounds a lot like disproportionate force. So I was wondering what your position is on the permissibility.
Is there a disconnect between your views on terrorism and your own views on fighting wars?
I'm sure there's a disconnect, but there's a completely different context, I would argue, in these two situations. One was, the argument was in order to bring the war there to a very quick end against a vicious tyrant in Serbia. But on the first point, the point I was making was this. I lived in the, I'm Jewish, not a secret. I lived in the Arab world, Arab Muslim world, for 5 years at a really critical time in Beirut, on and off for 5 years, 1979 to 1984. I was the Jewish correspondent for the New York Times. And I'm here today to tell that story, okay? What do I mean by that? I am deeply aware of the deep strain of tolerance within Islam. I have said on numerous occasions, if all the Jews in the world had not in the diaspora gone to Europe or to Germany, but lived in the Ottoman Empire, there'd be 6 million more Jews alive today. I really believe that. And because of that, it pains me to see people using this religion of tolerance, which I've lived and experienced in my own life, to simply justify any anger in their lives in order to go out and perpetrate something like that attack. It's such an insult to Islam and to other Muslims to say, I was upset about this, so I thought I could just do that. And I don't think we should take that connection.
You've written a lot of columns on a lot of wars, and people say to you, in Yugoslavia, you said hit the bridges. In Iraq, you said hit the power stations. When Lebanon was being bombed, you said exact a price on the civilian population who were backing Hezbollah. People say that sounds a lot like the language of terrorism. Hitting civilian targets deliberately.
I can certainly... Mehdi, in the case of Lebanon, Israel was dealing with an enemy, Hezbollah. If you've got an enemy who's nested deliberately among civilians, using rockets, that the only way was to do physical destruction, not people, to made very clear, let's warn everybody, get out. Because unless you have an internal movement within Lebanon against Hezbollah, which dragged the whole Lebanese nation into a war they never voted for, never wanted, this wasn't going to end.
Let's take a question from the back